Virtually everything on this planet can be expressed in terms of one common denominator. Do you know what it is? It's money. Money, like language, is uniquely human. Money is man-made. Money connects humans in a more extensive way than any other known medium. Literally everything is expressed within the terms of this one system, even time itself. Only now, after 3,000 years since the first coin was minted, is the full power of money becoming apparent in human affairs. Money begets money, and its offspring begets more. Everywhere that money goes, it creates marketplaces. The social network founded on commerce and money gives rise to political systems. These systems war against each other. The great struggle of history has been for the control over money. Competitors align themselves into various institutions, governments, and great families to gain control. The struggle continues. In our American experience, money has become invisible. Like God, it is totally abstract and without a corporal body. By moving electronically at the speed of light, money has become the most powerful financial, political, and social force in the world. As money grows in importance, a new struggle for control is beginning. In the emerging system, power flows under the control of a new class of financiers. Today, massive amounts of money is controlled through brokerage houses, banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and mutual fund management. In the quest to control the new money system, many contenders are struggling to become the primary money institution of the new era. The power of money and the institutions built on it are creating a new elite, an elite without loyalty to anyone. Financial planning for our own personal future has reached a new level of priority. However, the issues involved are more complex than we care to admit. Under such an economic environment, we feel small, powerless, and insignificant. We need help. How do we even begin to draw a map that leads to our desired monetary goals? What can we do? Who can we trust? Where do we go? How do we begin?
Many wonderful things have happened to me during my 78 years. Met all kind of
Virtually
fantastic
everything
people.
on this planet.
And an exceptional one happened to me about 7 years ago. I got a telephone call from a fellow in Nashville, Tennessee, whose name was Carlos Lara. He had been in someone's office, and on the desk of that person was a copy of my book. Carlos says, "Can I read that book?" He says, "Oh, you can have it." He probably hadn't even read it, had he? Okay. All right. So you see what little whimsical things take place out there that shape our lives big time. You're going to experience a wonderful presentation here from a very exceptional person, Carlos Lara.
Why do we have to have money? Now, that is a question you're apt to hear from a young child. Now, in that question, the child's really not interested in the function of money or where money came from, its origin, or the fact that money is just simply a convenient medium of exchange. Actually, the question stems entirely from the idea that the things the child wants cost money, and it doesn't have enough of it. So, the child's real question is this: why can't I have the things that I want when I want them without there being a cost attached to it? Now, when you seriously think about it, that is a very good question. Not only of children, but also of adults. It's a question that really doesn't press on us all that much when things are going well economically and we have sufficient incomes to pay for all the things that we want and we need. But what happens when that changes? Like the type of changes that so many Americans are experiencing right now. Well, all of a sudden, the alarm bells start to go off. And everybody, and I mean everybody, starts clamoring for answers about money. So in this next hour, we're going to talk and discuss and answer what I think are some very important questions about this subject. Now, in bringing these thoughts to your attention, I want you to know that I received an enormous amount of help. First of all, from the writings of all those classical natural law theorists, the men that make up the Austrian school of economic thought. And for today's discussion, specifically Murray Rothbard, but then certainly Mises, who was probably the most central economist of this way of thinking. But then also there's Hyatt, and there's Hazlitt, and Leonard Read, and just so many of them. I've also received an enormous amount of insight from good friends and fellow Austrians like Paul, who you heard last night. Paul Cleveland is my teacher, economic teacher and consultant. And then back home in Nashville, where I come from, there's Canadian-born Richard Grant, who's actually taught, worked in 12 different countries throughout the world. He's the current economics professor at David Lipscomb University, has an enormous amount of wealth on monetary policy. I depend on him a lot. And then there's young Dr. Robert Murphy, who he's a very prolific writer, wrote a study guide on Mises's great book, also Murray Rothbard's book, and he's just come out with this great little blockbuster. If you haven't read it, it's terrific. It's about the Great Depression. You can get it on Amazon. And I am very honored and proud to say that Robert and I are co-authoring a book right now that we hope to have out here very, very shortly. The Great Depression and the New Deal by Robert M. Murphy, Ph.D. And then, of course, more importantly, I've received a lot of help from our host, Nelson, who really has been a great inspiration to me. He's really a living testament of sincere conviction in everything he says and does. And then the brilliance of his common sense. I was on a telephone conversation with him a few weeks ago, and I was off talking on this economic issue about the public and the closed mind of the public. And he politely interrupted, and he said, "Carlos, have I told you the story about the potato?" Now, if you really want to learn something deep, you need to hear the story of the potato. Just the genius of his common sense. And then, more importantly, just the moral courage that he exhibits in speaking the truth without any fear whatsoever. So I come to you today pretty well prepared by all these folks. Now, today's presentation is actually a sequel to the one you heard from me earlier this year. So in effect, this is part 2 of that particular discussion. If you did not get a chance to hear part 1, I think you could probably get it from David Stearns, or you could go to my website and you can watch a video of it there as well. But to quickly summarize and bring you all on the same page from where I left off the last time, 6 months later, we find ourselves still in a stage opposite inflation, sort of a deflation, if you will, but most certainly a full-blown recession. Now, I like to think of it as the ideal situation for government to really step up its intervention programs. And step it up they have, just in the last 6 months. Remember that government cannot produce anything. It has no money of its own. It can only spend what it takes from the public. For that reason, they will continue to create and force more money into circulation, one way or another. It will continue to cut the interest rates, even below zero, if there is such a thing. It will continue to borrow and spend on future taxpayers' money. And it will continue to nationalize the banking sector and American industry. All of it, if it has to. Now, if you find yourself asking the question, why do they persist in doing this? Why? Well, it's because they are among the first recipients of the money that they create. And they need it. Now, the banks took this money that the government gave them and put them into excess reserves. Why? Because they're terrified that the bottom is still going to fall out of all these loans they have out there with individuals and businesses. But they will not hold on to that money forever. That money is burning a hole in their pocket. You know, after all, lending is how banks make their money. And right now, they have more money than they have ever had in the history of banking in the United States. And to prove that fact, I showed you this graph taken from the Federal Reserve website, which showed that in 1 year they pumped so much money into the system that it made that line shoot straight up. Now, there's never been an event that has ever happened like this ever. This graph goes all the way back to 1925. Not even during the Depression did they pump this kind of money in just 1 year. Now, this graph, it's the same graph. It just shows the difference between the money stock, which is the coins and the paper, and the demand deposits, which are the checking accounts. Now, here is the warning here. When this money finally comes out, an unknown right now. It's an unknown right now, but when it does, there will be a euphoria that will spread across the land. A feeling as though everything is getting back to normal again. You may have even seen some newspaper articles and magazines that are starting to write about this. Now, that is because people are beginning to access the new money and they're beginning to spend it, so they have more credit available to them. The thing you have to remember about this discussion is that there is so much money that's come into the system that when it comes out, it's going to create another big, huge bubble in the economy. What Paul Cleveland talked about, another boom. And what you need to remember is that boom will have a bust. And on the backside of that bust is going to be a wallop 1,000 times more powerful and more destructive than the one we just went through. Some economists right now are starting to think that this bust will be the straw that will break the camel's back and send us right into hyperinflation. Well, let's hope that they're wrong. But clearly the indicators are all there. They're all right there in front of us. So, what is it exactly that the Austrians want to see happen? Well, they want government to stop inflating. They want them to stop pumping this additional money into the system. But at the same time, they also want to return back to sound money. We just don't want to carry around this paper by itself. We want sound money, and we want a free market economy. The question is, how do we get there? How do we do that? Well, the Austrians have a 3-step solution to that. What they want to do is to take the paper and have it linked back to all of the gold that's in the possession of the central bank. So that would be step one. And if that happened, that means that every one of us that holds this paper would each get property rights to 1 unit weight of gold. If that were to happen, then all banks would immediately become solvent and begin operating on a 100% reserve basis. Why? Because upon demand of your paper, they would have to give you back gold. But the beautiful thing of this one step is that there would be no more inflation because you can't inflate gold. Now, as a second step, we would privatize all banking. Now, that just simply means that we could all go into the banking business. The result of that is the government's grip on money would be abolished. The monopoly that they currently have on money would stop. Now, if step 1 and step 2 were to be accomplished, then step 3 is a natural. There's no need for a central bank, and so you would just simply close it down. But the results of it, if that step was enacted on, the size and the expense of government would decrease enormously. Our taxes would go way down. If our taxes go way down, then our savings go way up. And savings translates into production. Production would skyrocket. So with this 3-step plan, we could once again regain the world's leadership in financial solvency and productivity. Now, I admitted to you earlier this year, and I'm going to do it again, this is very unlikely unless one very important thing happens. And that is if public opinion changes. We must make the public aware of the magnitude of this problem and drive home this solution. Now, in doing so, we do not have to convert the entire population of the United States. Only 10% will do it. Just 10%. Now, not just any 10%. 10% of the right kind of people, like you and me, our friends, our clients. Now, the unfortunate thing is we don't quite have the 10%. But man, we are making enormous strides because of the crisis. We really are. We are not alone in this battle. But we have lots of work to do. Now here is a very true statement from a forerunner of the Austrian school, Frederick Bastiat. We hold from God the gift which includes all others, and this gift is life. Physical, intellectual, and moral life. God created us with the ability to reason and to make choices. And these choices have consequences for good or for evil. When we take up the Austrian school battle cry, we innately know that we are fighting a huge intellectual war. Mises, the most celebrated and central figure of that school of thought, believed that we all had a moral responsibility to society to be in that war. And if you and I are going to be in that war, one of the most important things that we must do is that we must educate ourselves first. And in that process of education, we must learn who the real enemy is. And we need to study every one of his moves. Every good fighter, before he goes into battle, studies his adversary. Now keep in mind that we're not fighting any one person here. It's not a political party within our government. We are at war with an evil idea. An idea of the mind that is destructive to mankind and to society. And we have the evidence to prove it.
This is precisely why the Austrians have never had a problem pointing the finger directly at who the enemy is. And they do it without batting an eye. The enemy operates on many fronts. But keep in mind that we are speaking here today on money. And the enemy operates on the money front. And the enemy I speak of is the most secretive operation of the federal government. This agency is accountable to no one. It doesn't have a budget. It's not subject to any audit. And no congressional committee knows of or can even truly supervise its operations. And if that's not enough, there is one other very crucial point. It has complete control of the nation's money. No person, no group, no stockholders, no voters have been able to displace its ruling position. Now, simply on these grounds alone, American citizens should be outraged. Such a ruling elite with this kind of absolute power and lack of accountability is and should be public enemy number one. Now, the embodiment of the enemy is the central bank. In England, it's known as the Bank of England. In Italy, it is the Bank of Italy, and so on through every major foreign country in the world. Here in the United States, the central bank is known as the Federal Reserve. Its absolute defense for its power and its lack of accountability is defended on only one ground, just one. That any change in its power would weaken the Federal Reserve's ability and commitment to fight against inflation. Now, you heard me correctly, fight against inflation. Mr. Greenspan here says that the temptation is to step on the monetary accelerator, or to at least to avoid the monetary break until after the next election. Do you get a picture of the levers? And he says that giving in to such temptations is likely to impart an inflationary bias to the economy and could lead to the instability, recession, and economic stagnation. Isn't that what we have right now? And then he goes on to say that the Fed's lack of accountability is a small price to pay to avoid putting the conduct of monetary policy under the close influence of the public. Politicians subject to short-term election cycle pressure. So it's the lust of the public, he says, that inflates. And it's those dreaded inconvenient elections. Only the monetary experts of the Federal Reserve, according to him, can protect us from inflation. And you know, this